Derek Wills had it all. Fame, fortune, and the kind of spotlight most young athletes only dreamed of. At 24, he was already a household name. As the star running back for the Los Angeles Hawks, Derek had carved out a reputation for being unstoppable on the field. Broad shoulders, explosive speed, and a smile that disarmed even the most skeptical reporters, he was the full package. Sports networks ran highlight reels of his plays on repeat. Interviews praised his humble roots and relentless drive. Behind that carefully crafted image, though, was a young man raised in chaos, struggling to hide what the cameras weren't allowed to see. He came from a rough neighborhood in Detroit, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Coaches had once called him a miracle kid surviving the streets, making it through college ball, then going pro. But there had always been whispers, incidents that got swept under the rug, teammates who avoided eye contact. When asked about locker room fights, ex-girlfriends who declined interviews. One incident during college had involved a broken dorm door and a hospital visit, but no charges were filed. People said he was passionate, intense, misunderstood. The league never looked too closely. It wasn't until he met Kendra Lewis that things began to unravel in ways no one could ignore. Kendra was everything Derek wasn't. Soft-spoken but strong-willed, a young fashion designer making her mark in Atlanta. She wasn't interested in sports, didn't even recognize him at first. That only intrigued him more. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Their photos lit up social media, him in designer suits, her in her own custom dresses. Fans labeled them a power couple. The media followed their every move, but behind the scenes, something darker was unfolding. Friends of Kendra's noticed she became more private after moving in with Derek. At first, it seemed like she was just busy. Her career was picking up. She was traveling more. But soon, she began canceling lunch plans, missing calls, and avoiding her sister's FaceTimes. People assumed the relationship was just intense. What they didn't know was how controlling Derek had become. He didn't like her working late, didn't like her male clients. He insisted on checking her phone. Kendra, who had once been so independent, began to fade. And Derek's mood swings were growing worse. If he lost a game, she'd bear the brunt of it. If he saw a comment he didn't like under her Instagram post, it turned into an argument. He'd apologize after, sometimes, with gifts or trips. She told herself he was just stressed, that things would get better. Then came the first injury. Kendra wore sunglasses for a week, saying she had an eye infection. When a friend visited her unexpectedly, she noticed makeup smeared over a bruise on her cheek. Still, no one said anything. Kendra brushed it off, and no one wanted to believe the worst. After all, Derek was a national hero. What if they were wrong? The people around them continued to pretend everything was perfect. They attended events, smiled for the cameras, and stayed quiet. Derek's team wasn't blind, but they were invested. Millions were on the line. Sponsors didn't ask questions. And Kendra, caught between love and fear, stayed. The tension was building, invisible to the public, but heavy as a ticking clock behind closed doors. And no one, not even Kendra, knew just how close everything was to shattering beyond repair. Kendra Lewis had always trusted her instincts. Growing up in a tight-knit family in Savannah, Georgia, she had learned early to protect her peace, speak her truth, and never settle for less. That strength carried her through design school, long nights of sewing, and the early struggles of launching her brand. She built something real. Her name was gaining traction in Atlanta's fashion circles, and boutique owners had begun placing orders for her bold, elegant styles. But none of her training prepared her for the emotional labyrinth that came with loving Derek Wills. At first, everything felt like a dream. The late-night dinners, the luxury getaways, the way he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. He was intense but affectionate, protective but charismatic. It didn't take long for her to move in with him. Derek insisted it made sense. They were always together anyway. Kendra hesitated, but eventually gave in, thinking it was the next step in a serious relationship. That's when the shift began. It started with small comments. He didn't like the way one of her models looked at her. He thought her clothes were too revealing for public events. He said she didn't need to work so hard anymore. He could take care of her. Slowly, his concerns turned into rules. No late-night fittings. No phone calls after 10 p.m. He read her texts, critiqued her social media posts, even questioned her taste in friends. Kendra felt like she was being watched, not loved. The isolation was subtle but deliberate. He called it love. Said it was because he couldn't bear the thought of losing her. But Kendra began to feel suffocated. Her friends noticed the changes. She had always been confident, radiant. Now she looked tired, guarded. When asked how things were, she'd force a smile and change the subject. Deep down, she felt ashamed. Ashamed for letting it go on, for not leaving sooner. But every time she tried to pull away, Derek would flip the script. He'd cry, apologize, beg her not to give up on him. He said he was broken, that she was the only one who could fix him. Then came the physical signs, quick flashes of a temper she couldn't predict. One night, he punched a hole in the wall because she was 5 minutes late. Another time, he threw her phone against the floor when he saw an old message from a male colleague. He never hit her at first. Instead, he'd raise his voice, slam doors, grab her wrist a little too tight. And then he'd hold her, whispering that he didn't mean it, that the world was against him, that she was the only person who truly understood him. The first real injury came after a fight about her going to her cousin's wedding alone. He accused her of hiding something, of trying to meet someone else. When she tried to walk away, he shoved her. She fell and hit her head on the side of the dresser. Dazed and frightened, she spent the night on the bathroom floor, pretending to sleep. The next morning, he brought her flowers. She told no one. Kendra's world became one of silence and secrets. She felt like she was slipping into someone else's life, a version of herself that she didn't recognize. And despite all of it, she stayed. Because abuse doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It manipulates. It traps. And Kendra, like so many others, kept hoping the man she fell in love with would come back. But the Derek she once knew was gone. And the version that remained was becoming more dangerous by the day. It was a warm summer evening, on July 17th, when everything finally broke. The sun had long set over Atlanta, but the city buzzed with its usual noise, cars rolling past, music drifting from open windows, the low hum of weekend life. In a quiet upscale condo just outside the city, however, a different kind of chaos was unfolding. Inside, Kendra Lewis was living through the worst night of her life. For days, she had been trying to build the courage to leave. She had packed a small suitcase and hidden it in the back of the closet. Her sister Tamia had wired her money to book a hotel. Kendra even drafted an email to one of her mentors, asking for help rejoining the fashion circuit. She just needed one clean break, one moment to get out without being stopped. But Derek was watching her closely. He sensed her slipping away. That night, when he came home and saw her phone open to a bus schedule, his paranoia ignited. What followed was not an argument, it was an explosion. Neighbors later said they heard a crash, then a scream, and then silence. Inside, Derek was in a rage. He accused her of betrayal, of using him, of planning her escape behind his back. The words spiraled out of control. Kendra tried to calm him down, tried to walk away, but he blocked the door. The details of what happened next were pieced together through crime scene photographs, blood spatter analysis, and the silent testimony of a broken apartment. A heavy crystal lamp was shattered in the living room. Her phone was found in pieces near the baseboard. A bloody handprint streaked the hallway wall where she tried to crawl toward the front door. She was hit repeatedly, her face, her ribs, her neck. One eye was completely swollen shut. Her jaw was dislocated. Doctors later counted over a dozen blunt force injuries, some of which would leave her permanently impaired. When her body finally gave out, Derek walked away and locked himself in the bedroom. The next morning, Tamia, growing increasingly anxious after multiple unanswered texts, drove across town. She knocked. No answer. She called. No answer. Then, she noticed the door slightly ajar, just enough to raise alarms in her gut. What she found inside didn't make sense at first, just a mess, like someone had been robbed. Then she saw Kendra, lying in the hallway, motionless and bloodied. Kendra looked more like a crime scene mannequin than her vibrant sister. Paramedics were called immediately. She was rushed to Grady Memorial Hospital, where trauma surgeons worked. For hours to stabilize her, her brain was swelling. One lung had collapsed. She had lost so much blood, the E staff didn't think she'd survive the night. The doctors put her in a medically induced coma. Police arrived at the condo shortly after Tamia's frantic 911 call. They found Derek sitting on the edge of the bed, silent, unresponsive, hands resting on his knees. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't ask why he was being taken. He just stared blankly, as if the gravity of what he had done had not yet reached him. The news broke within hours. Star NFL player arrested in domestic violence incident. It sounded clinical, even vague. The headlines didn't capture the brutality. Social media split down the middle. Some demanded justice. Others defended Derek, claiming mental health, stress, even provocation. But the photos from the hospital spoke louder than any spin. Kendra's face, swollen beyond recognition, flashed across national news. Suddenly, the nation had a different kind of highlight reel to look at, and it wasn't pretty. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. News crews lined the steps outside, their cameras trained on every arriving lawyer, every whispered exchange. Protesters stood across the street, holding signs with Kendra Lewis's face. Inside, the tension was unbearable. This wasn't just a high-profile assault case. It had become a national flashpoint about justice, fame, and the value placed on a black woman's life. Derek Wills sat calmly at the defense table, dressed in a tailored navy suit, flanked by one of the most expensive legal teams in the country. His face was blank, unreadable. Kendra, still in a wheelchair, didn't attend the early hearings. She was still relearning how to speak, struggling through daily physical therapy, unable to walk without assistance. Her legal team represented her in court, armed with the evidence of what she had endured. The prosecution laid everything bare. Security camera footage from the hallway outside their condo showed Derek arriving home that night, clearly agitated. Photos from the scene showed the destruction inside the apartment, blood on the walls, shattered glass, overturned furniture. Medical experts described the injuries in detail: a fractured skull, dislocated jaw, damaged vocal cords, multiple contusions, and internal bleeding. Kendra's voice, though silenced physically, echoed through the courtroom in the form of text messages and handwritten notes shared with friends weeks before the attack. She had written that she felt scared, trapped, that Derek had promised to change, but only grew more controlling. Then came the defense. They admitted Derek had struck Kendra. They called it tragic, regrettable, but not evil. Their argument was centered on brain trauma, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. The defense brought in neurologists who spoke about head injuries from years of football. They described mood swings, paranoia, uncontrollable aggression. They argued that Derek was a victim too, a product of a brutal sport that had left his brain damaged. His past behavior, they said, was a series of warning signs ignored by the league, the coaches, and society. They pushed a narrative that painted Derek not as a monster, but as a broken man, abandoned by the system. The courtroom watched in discomfort as the line between accountability and excuse was blurred. After weeks of testimony, both sides rested. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was clear: guilty of aggravated assault, guilty of attempted manslaughter. Kendra's family cried quietly as the decision was read. For a brief moment, it felt like justice might prevail. Then came sentencing. The prosecution demanded a minimum of 20 years. They reminded the court that Kendra nearly died, that her life would never be the same, that her career had been stolen and her body permanently damaged. The defense pushed for leniency. They emphasized Derek's clean criminal record, his mental health diagnosis, his potential for rehabilitation. They argued he was remorseful and deserved a chance to rebuild. The judge spoke slowly. He acknowledged the seriousness of the crime, but cited mitigating factors, including Derek's age, lack of prior convictions, and mental health concerns. And then he delivered the sentence: 6 years in prison. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. 6 years. Less time than it took Kendra to build her business. Less time than she would spend in recovery. Less time than he had played professional football. The judge offered words about redemption, the importance of second chances. But to many, it felt hollow. Outside the courthouse, the reaction was immediate. Activists shouted into microphones. News anchors struggled to remain neutral. Online, anger exploded. 6 years for nearly killing a woman. 6 years for a lifetime of pain. 6 years because the man who did it used to wear a jersey on Sundays. Aftermath of the trial rippled far beyond the courthouse. Across the country, people debated what the 6-year sentence truly meant. For some, it was another painful example of how the justice system protected powerful men, especially athletes. For others, it was a complicated situation, tragedy, shaped by mental illness and systemic failures in sports culture. But for Kendra Lewis, there was no debate. There was only pain, healing, and the slow, grueling journey to reclaim her life. After the verdict, Kendra withdrew from the public eye. Her face, once splashed across headlines, now appeared in quiet support groups and therapy sessions. She was still relearning basic tasks, tying her shoes, brushing her hair, forming full sentences. Doctors said her brain would never fully recover. Her balance was off. Her speech remained slow. She tired easily and often found herself overwhelmed by loud noises or bright lights. The vibrant designer who once strutted through fashion shows was now fighting just to stand. But Kendra was not done. From her hospital bed, she began outlining a vision. Not for a new clothing line, but for a foundation. One that would support women who had survived domestic violence, especially Black women, whose stories often went ignored or disbelieved. With help from her sister and a small team of friends, she launched the Still Standing Project. It offered shelter assistance, therapy referrals, and legal advocacy for survivors. Within months, it gained national attention. She spoke publicly. For the first time a year after the attack, her voice soft but unwavering. Cameras zoomed in on her trembling hands and slow speech, but her message cut through every frame. He tried to break me, but I'm still here. Derek Wills, meanwhile, served his sentence at a low-security facility in Northern California. He spent his days in counseling sessions, group therapy, and coaching prison football. He gave no interviews, made no public statements. Quiet rumors suggested he was working on a memoir. His fans slowly moved on, many erasing him from memory. The NFL never formally acknowledged the case. The Los Angeles Hawks deleted his photos from their website and scrubbed social media references. For them, the chapter had closed, but for Kendra, it never would. Each day was a new challenge. PTSD haunted her sleep. Loud knocks made her flinch. She no longer trusted easily, no longer walked without checking behind her. Still, she kept pushing forward. She designed a small clothing collection for charity, simple pieces inspired by survival. The line sold out in days. The fashion world, once her entire life, had shifted into something else. A tool, not for fame, but for healing. Her story began appearing in college textbooks, documentaries, and panel discussions. She was no longer just the victim of Derek Wills. She was Kendra Lewis, survivor, activist, and voice for the silenced. Yet, the anger never fully left the public. People couldn't forget that a nearly fatal assault had resulted in just 6 years. Social media continued to spark with outrage whenever Derek's name resurfaced. Hashtags like #6years is not justice and #Kendra deserved better trended every year on the trial's anniversary. Even after serving his sentence, Derek would find no easy return to the spotlight. Kendra often said she didn't want revenge. She wanted change. She wanted a world where women were believed the first time, where fame didn't buy freedom, where survivors didn't have to become warriors to be heard. And though she had lost so much, her health, her career, her voice, she had gained something few people ever do: the power to turn pain into purpose. And while the justice system had failed her, she refused to let that be the end of her story. She had survived, and she would never be silenced again.